Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Digital Friday series. The Digital Friday series is a series organized by the HASTAC Scholars. HASTAC Scholars is a fellowship program hosting an innovative, student-driven community of graduate and undergraduate students. You can learn more about HASTAC at www.hastac.org.
Today we're going to be exploring the balance, if that even is a thing, among schoolwork, work, and life. We'll be talking specifically about our experiences as graduate students who work full-time outside of our graduate programs. But these issues really impact any kind of student who has a job, class, and a personal life. So now let's tell you more about who we are. I'm Molly Mann. By day, I'm a full-time administrator in a graduate division of arts and sciences, and by night, I'm a PhD candidate in English. I found this path after wanting to go into the academy during my undergraduate study, but getting some honestly terrible advice from a faculty advisor at the time who made me feel like pursuing a PhD in the humanities was the worst thing a human being could ever do. Instead, I got a master's degree in library and information science, where I learned a lot of translatable skills that I was able to bring into higher ed administration. But once there, I still had the bug to pursue research. And so here I am in the midst of dissertation writing and teaching and adminning and juggling all of those things. And my partner in crime today is Joe Ginese. So tell us some more about you, Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Ginese, and I'm a full-time manager for the new and first-year experience at Borough of Manhattan Community College in New York City. I'm a full-time husband and father and a part-time first-generation college student as an EDD candidate in instructional leadership at Hunter College. And I'm pretty obsessed with the concept of continued professional learning, or what some would call professional development. And you can tweet me or email me afterward about why that term carries a heavy negative connotation, in my opinion. But after completing my bachelor's and master's in business, I ended up in higher education sort of just because it was something I was really interested in, and continued on to get an advanced graduate certificate in adult learning and facilitation. And after that, I still had a thirst for research and learning. And here I am earning a doctorate, or trying to, which I just started this summer. So today we're going to try something new and different. For when people think of a webinar, this is going to be a different approach. We're going to explore this topic in an interview format, as neither of us consider ourselves to be experts in this area, no matter how much we try. So let's get started. So Molly, let's discuss the status of the student, because that will determine a lot of the advice and questions that we'll try and field. Let's get some definitions out there. What is a full-time graduate student? What is a part-time graduate student?
I've thought a lot about this throughout my studies because I'm fortunate to be in a doctoral program that does allow for a part-time study, and not all of them do. My department also works very hard to ensure community and inclusion for part-time students, which can be really challenging. I still feel like I miss out on some things because I'm working during the day and not as deeply embedded in the department culture, though. So roughly full-time graduate students are typically funded so that they're able to devote full-time hours to coursework and research. Part-time graduate students, on the other hand, usually have full-time jobs outside of the academy and are therefore taking classes at night and progressing more slowly through their degrees. Of course, when it comes to the dissertation phase, as I'm learning now, all bets are off there. I did my coursework part-time, but I'd say now that my dissertation is another full-time job.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not there yet, so I'm very much still in the part-time role. So I guess what are the differences? Because if you're full-time research or full-time student, like you said, you're doing nothing. Well, maybe you're doing more than school, but your main priority is school. And if you're part-time, your main priority is really work, and you're trying to fit this school thing in. So what are the differences in how each of these populations typically finance their education?
Yeah, so I certainly don't want to exclude anyone here by being too broad in my response, but very roughly, full-time graduate students in doctoral programs generally receive funding. Now, graduate stipends are certainly not the equivalent of a professional salary, and they do require a lot of research or teaching or other responsibilities. So I'm certainly not saying that that's a cushy lifestyle by any means. But it does allow for more immersion in the program than does working full-time at another job and then being a graduate student at night. I think it's also important to note that there are certainly class dimensions to this question. To be able to survive on a graduate student stipend of like, $3,000, $6,000 per semester is really tough. And often that requires family financial support from parents, a partner, or something like that. Many of us who are going to graduate school part-time and working a full-time job as well are doing so because that is the only option that we have. So there are a lot of aspects to this that pose challenges.
Right, and especially considering loans or trying to make ends meet,
Right.
and especially where you're studying. If you're trying to do a PhD in New York City on $6,000 a semester,
Yeah, forget it.
it's not going to work out too well for you.
No.
So if you do have to work either through a full-time job, part-time job, or research assistantship hours, how does that impact the time that a student in a PhD or EDD program or a master's program has to study, write, and research?
Yeah, so that's the challenge, right? Is that time is a finite resource. So I consider myself someone who's pretty good at time management, which is something that you will be talking about a little bit later on. But I came to realize that when it came to research and writing, simply cobbling together bits of time and mapping it out on a calendar really isn't enough for the kind of deep work that a doctoral program requires. So on one hand, I think having a full-time work schedule provides me with some structure for when work can get done. If I have an hour to do something, I need to get it done in that window of time. So it prevents procrastination. But on the other hand, dissertation writing requires you to immerse yourself in your ideas and your argument. And that poses a challenge when you need to give time and mental bandwidth to, your job.
Right. It's not like these writing challenges where it's like, oh, just write 100 words. When you're doing a dissertation, you need to sit down and write for 100 minutes, not just write 100 words.
Yeah, and like come up with an original and cohesive argument. So.
Right. So that's usually the hardest part. I had a professor who said 98% of the people who start a PhD or EDD do so because they're good students. Mm-hmm. But not everybody can create knowledge, and that's that last 2%. Like you have to be able to create knowledge from what you're reading and make something new. Mm-hmm. All right, so finally, access. What kinds of differences do we have to consider in terms of access? When it comes to full-time and part-time, you have access to libraries, to resources, to office hours, to study group meetings. What's the differences there that you've seen from a part-time student perspective and maybe those who are full-time students?
Yeah, so I will say again that my program has done a really great job of this and works to include part-time students in the culture of graduate education. I'm also fortunate that I actually work on the campus, so I can pop over to the library if I need to grab a book or something, but if my job were located elsewhere, that would be much more challenging. When I was studying for my comp exams, I was able to meet with my committee during my lunch break, and I put lunch break in quotes because I've never actually used it to eat lunch, but that's a testament to their commitment more than mine, I think. But there are some things like job talks and writing groups and seminars, things that, come up during the day. And I do feel like I miss out on those things because I'm working. That might not really seem like a big deal. One of those things individually is not really a big deal, but collectively, when you consider how social our field is and how much opportunity comes out of relationship building, it does add up.
Absolutely. And I mean, it sounds like regardless of your student status, whether you're full-time or part-time, there is going to be resources available to you. There's going to be forms of support available to you, but there's going to be a lot of challenges as well. So what are some of the strategies that you found success in with your studies?
Yeah, so I really found myself needing a strategy per se when I moved into the dissertation phase. So coursework and even the comprehensive exam that I took was a shorter term finite process. So that meant that I was writing like a couple of seminar papers at the end of each semester, and that was a manageable goal that I felt I can handle pretty well. But dissertation writing feels like it goes on forever sometimes. And it's not something that you can like cram for. It's not just like a week of drinking a lot of coffee and pulling all-nighters. It's about developing sustainable writing habits that will carry you through a long-term project. So those are habits that you need even after your dissertation is defended, if you're moving into a faculty position or publishing, right? And you need to do anything that requires you to maintain a regimen of scholarly activity. But it's something that was very new for me as I began my dissertation. So when I first started that, I was pretty militant about scheduling time in the calendar and just making sure my butt was in a chair. But I quickly learned that kind of discipline only carries you so far. So my body was in front of the computer, but the ideas were not coming. And it was just this kind of agony to sit there. So I was asking a lot of productive people I know about their writing habits, and it seemed like everyone had a different approach that worked for them. I also, through my dissertation workshop, came across Volker's Writing Your Dissertation for 15 Minutes a Day, which reinforced this idea that writing has to be sustainable in the long term. And that means grooving in the process rather than being so aggressively focused on the end result. So from there, I focused more on really building joy into those writing moments so that I actually looked forward to sitting down and writing every day. So depending on my mood and schedule, I generally switch up my writing time between very early in the morning before work and then in the evenings after work. I'm personally not a late night writer. My brain shuts off after a certain time, but that might work for people too if working late at night is good for you. So I listen to music. I make sure I have, some really delicious coffee, or depending on the time of day, maybe a cocktail, and try to make things, smell good and feel good and visually appealing in my workspace so that I'm happy to be there. And that's made a huge difference for me. So I also break the project into very tiny, manageable chunks so that I know when I do sit down, it's this kind of ritual part of my day and it doesn't have to last any longer than it really needs to. And I can gain a sense of accomplishment and momentum from ticking off that day's tasks. So Joe, I know that you've developed your own time management approach and you have some additional considerations there as well. So would you like to share those?
Yeah, since I'm just starting off, you just taught me a lot about about what I have to look forward to. But it's really getting to know your body and when you focus, right? So for me, I can't focus at night. So I think a lot of like what you were saying, at a certain point, my brain is done. But I know between like 10 and 1 o'clock or even 9:30 and 1 o'clock, once I sit down, I am going to go nonstop for 3 hours. I don't have to look up. My brain is just right in that flow moment. And you have to find time for joy when you need to find that space as well. So whether it's your space in your living situation, a space in your head, or the space with your bandwidth of attention, time management is this great thing when you first have the time to plan to manage it. So that, that's what I found to be the biggest challenge, especially as a part-time student and full-time employee and full-time partner. I feel like I essentially have 3 roles that require different types of attention, focus, and effort. So how I do it, for better or worse, I compartmentalize. So I have a 3-hour commute, 90 minutes each way from the city to New Jersey. So I do all my doctoral work, my reading, my research, my writing as much as I can in that time. So my space, as soon as I sit down on that bus seat, I pull out my little laptop and I know this is it. I'm focused. I'm not paying attention to traffic or temperature. I have to get this done. Much like you were saying earlier about being organized, I know once my stop comes, I can't keep riding the bus. I have to close up and get going. So I try to do all my work there and avoid having to take it home and avoid having to do it during office hours. I'm not always successful. And there's been many a lunch hour spent writing and researching and reading. And there have been some nights, after my partner goes to sleep and after my kids go to sleep, I'm like, I just got to get this one more thing done. But regardless, my main goal is to always try and keep those things separate. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit later, but I try as much as I can. My student role shuts down the moment I get off the bus. My work role begins the moment I sit down on my workstation, and my home role begins the moment I walk through the door. So that's my approach. I'm going to expand on it later. But Molly, how do you manage it?
Well, I don't have kids in the mix, so I have so much respect and admiration for you for having that additional responsibility to manage. Also, for anyone listening outside of New York, a 3-hour commute is not really out of the ordinary here, but it's still a huge chunk of the day. So it's great that you make that productive time for yourself instead of just sort of dead air. I'm honestly trying to get a bit better at compartmentalization between my full-time job and my doctoral work and my personal life. So for me, that means turning off work emails and text messages when I'm writing. But I found that really, really hard to do, especially because I'm sure you find this as well. My job requires an immediate response from me sometimes. And there just generally is such a demand that we all stay so connected. So it's really a challenge to unplug for any considerable period of time. My partner is also an academic, and we tried for a little bit to write together as a way to kind of multitask our writing time and our together time, but that really did not work. I just felt like I was giving him half of my attention and then not getting any work done on top of it. So now we just have an understanding that if one of us is writing or both of us are writing, we're in separate spaces and just not disturbing each other. So speaking of, partners and families and all of the other people who have an impact on our lives, Joe, how important do you think a support network is to managing a range of responsibilities, and how have you navigated that for yourself?
That's a great question. And it really comes down to, I want to say that it's an absolute requirement, but that's coming from a place of privilege in that I have an amazingly supportive partner that has encouraged this path. I have an extended family that recognizes the burden that this can sometimes have on those off hours. So they'll jump in and help my partner when I'm at class or if I have to run to a coffee shop and write. And I'm also lucky that I have supervisors who agreed to allow me to adjust my schedule to accommodate leaving early to go to class. So they've also been extremely supportive in my pursuit of this and encouraged me to do it. So as I said, it comes from a place of privilege that I know I'm extremely lucky to have on all those fronts. People who are like, yes, go do this. And I have so much support and people recognizing, I'm recognizing that not everybody has a partner, not everybody lives within walking distance of family, and not everybody is going to have support from their supervisors or colleagues. My advice to you is find it. And there's so many of us out there, whether you're looking through Twitter, I'm a first generation college student, so there's a whole hashtag first gen doc. If you're in student affairs and you're looking at doctorate students, there's a whole essay doc hashtag of a community of people who are doing their doctorate who work within student affairs. LinkedIn, there's communities within LinkedIn of people who are just continuously looking at continued professional learning or doctorate programs. Facebook, throw it out there, share what you're doing, and see who also is sharing these different obstacles, these different successes, and different questions that they have. If all else fails, you don't like social media and you have no one to connect to, look at your classmates. And even if you're in an online program or an in-person program, you're all in this journey together. My program right now, there's 8 of us. So we're going to get to know each other. We take all the classes together. We go all along the same path. You're a part of that cohort. So I would say you should not try or attempt or feel that you have to do this alone. Because I don't think that's sustainable. There are many people maybe who have said, yeah, I did it all by myself. No one helped me out. And maybe that's from their perspective. I don't think that's necessarily true. I'm sure they've had a professor or a mentor or, somebody on their committee who said, hey, don't give up. And after the fact, they maybe recognize that. But in my opinion, you have to have somebody or some people, even if it's just if it's a huge group of acquaintances through social media or one person from home, you have to have somebody that tells you this is going to be worth it. It's almost the analogy I was thinking of, it's no different than a marathon runner. You're running a marathon and there's just random strangers on the sidelines who are yelling, keep it up. They have no idea who you are. You have no idea who they are, but they're there to say, yeah, you're doing a thing. You go do that thing. So you need those who know who you are, and you got to find those who don't to be sources of any kind of motivation, and really, really, really recognize and acknowledge that you are not alone in pursuing a master's degree or a doctorate degree. There are many of us out there. And if you need a pat on the back, a high five, or a random cup of coffee, if you're in the city, reach out to us and we'll share our contact information at the end. But you're not alone. And I think you have to have some sort of support network, whether it's numerous people or one person. You need someone.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned shortly before that you tend to compartmentalize work, research, and home responsibilities. Has this been an effective strategy for you, and would you recommend that to other folks? What are some of the other considerations there?
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to contradict myself. So I said try to compartmentalize the work as best you can, but that doesn't mean compartmentalize your mindset, your feelings, or your stress. So, and I try to keep those two things separate for better or worse. So I find it super helpful that I'm able to shut my mind off of what the work I have to do and when I have to do it. And, if I'm in one of those 3 spots, whether it's home, work, or class, but mentally and physically, if I'm exhausted, I have to acknowledge, oh, I'm exhausted from work, or I'm exhausted from the kids, or I'm exhausted from all this reading. So let me try it. And because I know this is like convoluted. So you're simultaneously wearing multiple hats when you're a grad student, or generally as a person, but in this instance, as a grad student. So you're a student, a partner, a worker, a mentor, a sibling, whatever the case is. Those hats are going to influence you in every place of your being. For instance, what you learn in class one night might change your practice the next morning at work. which may change how you approach a situation with your family, your friends, or your partner. That's what I find helpful. So, to reiterate what I've learned or practice what I've learned, I'm not keeping what I've learned only in my classes. I'm not keeping what I do only in my workplace. And I'm not serving as a role model of a lifelong learner only at home. All those things are interwoven. What I'm trying to, the compartmentalization piece is my attempt at trying to not let my homework responsibilities interfere with my lifestyle at home and vice versa. So the fact that my kid has an ear infection, yeah, that's annoying and that's stressful, but I'm keeping that separate from what we were doing in class. And so for better or worse, this works for me. This doesn't work for everybody. And sometimes it really, it annoys my partner to no end. But it's extremely difficult to navigate, but because I'm only focusing on class while in class, it can be perceived as I'm not prioritizing work or home equally. And if I'm at home, I'm home. And I'm not checking messages from classmates about the work because this is my home time and I'm going to protect that. Nothing is going to detract from that. So I compartmentalize the responsibilities as much as I can. But don't compartmentalize the mindset or the thoughts or the ideas, because you may come across something in your research that you can throw back. I'm lucky, we're a dual career couple, so my partner is also in student affairs. So something I read, I can be like, hey, this is really interesting. And she might expand on that further. That's going to help me as a researcher and as a student. And, so yeah, I know I'm talking in circles now, but like this whole idea of compartmentalization, it's just trying to keep, I would never sit in bed or sit on the couch and be reading coursework if my kids or my family is around.
Yeah.
Right. So I try and keep that separate. Again, I have that, whether or not you want to call it a place of privilege, that I have 90 minutes each way, 3 hours a day on a bus that I can get the work done.
I would not call that privilege. No.
Yeah. So, and I'll be honest, I don't know if I would be pursuing this if I didn't have that time, because again, I like to compartmentalize. So the fact that I would have to take time away from family and lock myself in an office or lock myself in a room or go to a Starbucks or a coffee shop and say, nope, this is my time, I would struggle with that. So if I didn't have this 3-hour commute, I don't know if I'd be a grad student or a doctorate student.
Yeah. Well, that's something I can certainly learn from you, some of those skills. And I think, both of us are in administrative roles, and that it's kind of especially true, I think, for those kinds of jobs where we're doing a lot of problem solving and we're carrying a lot of other people's concerns around with us all day.
Yes.
Needing to leave that in the office is especially important if you want to really focus on any long-term work. Yeah. So you shared this idea with me of confidence architects, and I find it so interesting. So can you tell us what that is and how you identify those people?
Yes. So this was a concept that was developed between a colleague of mine, Mallory Bauer, I think like 5 or 6 years ago. Now, Mallory and I have met in person, I think twice. We met mainly on Twitter, and we've vlogged together and really developed it and presented on it and everything. So a confidence architect is somebody in your life who builds your confidence. Basically, they are never there to shoot you down. They're never snarky. They're never sarcastic. They only had their main focus, their main purpose in your life, or one of their main purposes in your life, is to build you up. So if you're at your lowest moment, this is the person who comes by your office with your favorite candy, or comes by your office and says, hey, let's go grab a coffee, and gets you out of that funk that you may be in. So, you can call them best friends, you can call them mentors, you can call them, your work buddy. We came up with the word confidence architects because we found that it was these people, and it was along the lines of mainly like Twitter, when a few years ago, there was a huge community on Twitter, and some of us became confidence architects for each other. So they would be sending each other emails. Hey, how does this paper look? Hey, does this sound right? I'm going to look at this conference. Can you look at my slide deck? And the architect would say, yeah, this looks good. I think you're really onto something. And here's what else you should consider. Now, is it overly flowery and like nothing but positive? No, it was very constructive criticism. So it was always constructive feedback. Now, how you identify those people, we never really explored that. It was really a mix. Like you just kind of find people who always are positive or always looking at, that's great, and let's add this. right? So it's like the improv thing where you never say no in an improv skit, because then you kill the skit. So it's these people in your life who constantly say yes, and you should also consider this. Like, oh, I have this idea and I think it'd be a great idea if we stopped emailing students for a week. Yeah, that sounds good. And maybe perhaps we should text them as well. Like, can't completely kill it off. They won't kill your idea, but they'll say, you know, you're onto something there. What if we did it this way? So finding those as it relates to being a grad student, it's those people who are never going to say, when you pitch your idea or your research or your thought or your paper, and say, no, that's a stupid idea.
Yeah.
They're just not that type of people. They're the people going to say, huh, tell me more. And they won't tell you how you should do it, but they're going to get you there by asking questions and probing and kind of lead you along this path. And that, we just figure that, you know, that's a confidence architect. They're building up your confidence by helping you gain the skills and gain the learning and helping you discover in yourself that, hey, you're capable of doing this.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So I think we're flying through this, and we're kind of coming to the end. And to see the light at the end of the path, the concept of the doctorate to the door. Now, this is something you came up with. So why don't you tell me more about what that means?
Yeah, sure. As we talked about, a working professional decides to take on all of this added responsibility of a doctoral degree or graduate degree for one of two reasons, right? So they either want to move forward in their current field or they want to make a career change. For me personally, I love my job and I love higher ed administration. I get to walk into work every morning and there's a list of problems to solve, and my goal by the end of the day is to untie those knots and help students and faculty in the process, and that's something that I really love doing. Education has also always been one of my highest values, and so I find it really rewarding to be the person behind the scenes facilitating those opportunities for people. And I think that throughout my career, I will always be seeking out some kind of administrative or service role in some capacity. But because of the structure of humanities education and my job right now, most of the higher up admin roles come from tenured faculty. So in my position right now, there really is no actual way for me to move up or even make a lateral move in my institution. So I just don't have very much room to grow right now, and I need to think strategically about the forward trajectory of my career. So on one hand, I have some amazing mentors that I work with who've encouraged me to think ambitiously about my career options. But on the other hand, you know, this is still my job right now, and it's one I enjoy and I'm lucky to have. So I worry sometimes that because I'm pursuing my PhD, that people will think I'm kind of less committed to my current role because I'm thinking of future moves. And that makes me kind of, you know, I just haven't found a level of comfort in talking about that with colleagues or having that be part of my professional life. So I guess that's one area where I'm compartmentalizing that. I just generally try to keep the fact that I'm writing my dissertation pretty low key, and I don't really talk about it at work. But you kind of fall into the other kind of graduate student. So do you want to tell us more about how you're leveraging your doctoral degree to grow in your current field?
Yeah. So in my position, I don't know what my what my trajectory is going to be. I know there's a lot of colleagues at BMCC right now who are at my level who are also pursuing doctorate degrees, and I think we're all going to end up all over New York. Some of us will end up maybe being deans or vice presidents or directors of other programs or go faculty side. I don't know where we're going to end up. But my goal was really, my whole background was business and trying to get more and more education. It just seems to me leveraging this doctoral degree not only is going to open up more pathways to the academic side of the house, and I hate even the language of that side of the house because we're all under the same roof.
Yeah, for sure.
We're all trying to do the same thing. But there is a certain, when you see, you know, doctor or EDD or PhD at the end of somebody's signature line, is a certain weight that gets added to your emails or your messages or your writing. Whether it's a badge of honor or a badge of I made it through it too, or I'm a researcher, whatever it is. How I'm planning to use it is I'm lucky enough that the program that I'm in at Hunter, I'm able to apply what I'm doing daily, almost always in my job, to my coursework and to my research. So there's a lot of overlap between the two. So the idea in my mind is that as I'm doing this research and doing more studying and learning more about different theories and different practices and promising practices and developing promising practices, I'm able to do that in real time, and maybe create a position for myself where, hey, I'm specialized in continued professional learning, and I can also serve students, and I know the lay of the land administratively, and I'm on the student affairs side, but I have a doctorate. So how many of us have doctorates within student affairs in the division? So it's trying to figure out, I'm being very open about it, like, hey, yeah, I'm a doctorate student too, because there's, like I said, there's a number of us. So it's, people know about it, people see it, it's somewhat celebrated at some meetings, like, oh, this person's pursuing this. So I'm trying to leverage it as, this is one more credential that should make me a stronger candidate for that next step. And within student affairs, whether that's another director level, a senior director level, an assistant dean, associate dean, or a dean, depending on the size of the school, the opportunity. But I'm also looking at it as a sense of growing as a researcher and as a contributor to the field. So in the research I'm doing now, I'm finding a lot that we have a lot of very, very talented people in higher education on the administrative side, whether it's within student affairs or academic affairs or administration. And we're doing these great things, but nobody, or not enough of us, are writing about it or sharing it or presenting it like you and I are doing right now. We're not getting our expertise out there, maybe partially because we think we're not experts, but okay, we don't have to be considered experts, but at least by sharing what we're experiencing and sharing what we're researching and sharing what we're finding, it may, spark in somebody else, hey, if you can do that, maybe I can do it too. Hey, I'm interested in that. I didn't know that's something that somebody could research. How can I chase that? So I'm leveraging really to grow. And I hate this. Like, the first thing that comes to mind is thought leader, and there's such like I don't like the term thought leader. Everybody's a leader in their thoughts. But the idea of being the subject matter expert, and I think we didn't get into it at all, but when you come to a dissertation, what's been emphasized in my program is you cannot be too broad in a topic. You have to be you should try to be somewhat specific. So coming up with this one singular idea that you can be that subject matter expert on, and use that as leverage to show that you can benefit the field, you can benefit another institution, you can benefit your local community by leveraging that. I think that's what I'm trying to do, is really use it to benefit not only my institution, not only the field, but myself at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. And, I think for me, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, the way that those things come together for me and allow me to grow in my position, even thinking further ahead than that, is just really the practice of doing research, that we are invested in education in both our professional lives and our academic lives, right? And just that practice of researching and publishing really sort of connects everything together for us and helps us keep the overarching goals in mind as well.
Yeah.
So you also mentioned an idea of having a board of directors for your career planning. So can you share that with us and what that's meant for you?
Yeah. So I mentioned Mallory Bauer earlier, and this stemmed off of the confidence architects conversation that her and I had. Your board of directors are people. Think of a board of directors of a company or an organization. They're typically experts in some aspect of the field related to what the organization does. And they bring different perspectives, and they serve as the board of directors because they're interested in the success of said organization or company. We kind of developed this concept of having your own personal board of directors. So these are people in your lives that are directly invested in your success. Not monetarily, maybe with time, maybe with, maybe with some inspiration here and there, or serving as role models. But this board of directors are people that, for me, it was a number of professionals who are senior level, who had many more years in the field than I had many more experiences in the field than I had. And I reached out to them, was able to connect with them through conferences or Twitter or being in the same region. And I said, here's what I'm thinking to do with my career. Here's the path that I see myself taking, and getting there expertise, just like a board of directors. You would present to the board, I think we want to launch this product, or I think we're going to go into this market, or I think we're going to pursue this strategy. I would do that to this board of directors that was the board of directors for my life, or really for my career, not so much my life, but for my career. And they were diverse. So there were people that were outside of higher ed. There were people that were inside higher ed. There were people that were community leaders. There were people, from all different aspects of life. And they just would provide really helpful feedback. Because if you ask only higher ed people how a higher ed degree is going to help, they're going to tell you, ideally, probably nothing but great things. But if you ask somebody who's in a business field, how could a higher ed degree help me if I'm looking at this trajectory? They're going to come at it from a different way of like, oh, you could leverage that in a number of different ways. Don't just think about education of, students. Think about education of employees and education of community members. So the board of directors and how you would find them, it's really just a matter of organizing your mentors. You're not going to get all the people in the same room and be like, all right, folks, here's my plan for my life. But you can, you just, if there's something that comes up, if you're pursuing, new job offers, or if you're thinking of pursuing a doctorate degree, or you're finishing your master's, you're not sure where to go next with it. These are the people who you would write one email that would almost be like the same for all of them. You'd add in the salutation, throw in a personal anecdote, and then ask them the main question and see how many different responses you get. And hopefully that gives you some insight into where you think you want to go. So your board of directors are really, they're not people in your everyday life, but they're people that you keep in contact with because they brought you value at a certain point in your life, and you value them so much that you respect their opinion. And their opinion that they give you is sort of the, unbiased. They're going to tell you like it is. It's not going to be candy coated. They're just going to say, yep, you're being dumb right now. You need to stop doing that. Or they're going to be, wow, that's really great. You should, explore that further. And here's some people who I know that could help you do that. So they're like the networking hub. They're really the people. You probably have many of these people in your lives already. Mallory and I just said, what if you organized it and had your own, in your mind, your board of directors, and these are the people that are sitting around the table helping determine your path to success in life, or however you define the success.
So would you say for you that's been more of an organic process or an intentional process of putting that together?
That's a great question. It was both. I mean, it was organic in the sense of I was connecting with people, again, mainly through Twitter years ago, and through participation in regional and national conferences. And then when I connected with Mallory, who her background, my background at the time, well, still now, is orientation and new students. Her background was mainly career and being in career services and teaching. And just discussing like, oh, I'm going to talk to this person about this issue, and I'm going to call this person about that issue. And she had the same type of people of like, yeah, I call this person when I'm facing this issue, and I call that person when I'm having this idea. And it just kind of came up like, this sounds a lot like board of directors. Like if you had to have a board of directors in your life, this is who would be around the table. So organically, it may happen. You're going to have people in your life that you run into that make an impact on you, and you may put the effort in to stay in touch with them. It's also intentional, because you could read a book by somebody, or see somebody present at a conference, or have somebody on your campus or in your community that you're like, I need to get to know that person, and reach out. And I've done that, and people think, oh, that doesn't happen. I've done that a number of times, where at the end of a conference presentation, I'll walk up to the presenter and be like, hey, that's really great. Here's what you got me thinking about. Could I keep in touch? Grab their business card and send them a message right away, whether you're on the plane flying home, or the moment you get back to the office the next day, or your hotel room, wherever it is, and send that message. In my experience, I haven't seen many people go up to the presenter, thank them for their time, and then say, I have some more ideas. Would you be able to explore this further? So and that usually has gotten a lot of positive response, because many times people are going up to the presenter, in my experience, saying, hey, can you share your slides? Like, you don't want to know anything about how we came up with these ideas? You don't want to discuss? No, just give me your slides. Yeah, that's not how you build your board of directors. That's not helpful.
And that's not really engaging with the idea either.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the board of directors is really, it's the walking, talking, breathing, living resources in your life. But speaking of resources, aside from people, there are a number of different resources out there that grad students can use, right?
Absolutely. So we've gathered some of those here for anyone who's bridging academic and professional life, or really just working to manage several responsibilities at once. If anybody, wants these links, just email us. We're happy to share them with you. So the first one is the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity, which is a really great resource for writing support, career planning, mentorship. Also, Jennifer Polk's From PhD to Life project is fabulous for thinking about translating doctoral work and skills outside the academy. The MLA Connected Academics, great for career planning as a doctoral student. We've also included the RICE course workload estimator, which is key if you're teaching and you're trying to time manage that for yourself, but also for your students, and figure out what that workload would look like. I mentioned Joan Bulker's book, Writing Your Dissertation in 15 Minutes a Day, earlier. I found it really helpful in dissertation writing, but really any long-term research or writing projects. And then also, the Chronicle of Higher Education and publications like Inside Higher Ed have really had much more of a focus on the part-time graduate student experience recently. So we've included an article there, but there are many more of those similar articles out there. So you should check those out. So what questions do we have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing all those resources, because there was some there that I wasn't aware of. So I already bookmarked some of those. But certainly resources like checking out, HASTAC.com, connecting with that community.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
questions that came up. That was what was interesting about the format that we picked to do this here, is we kind of developed these questions for each other. So we could ask, how are we going to manage this, and what ideas do you have about it?
Right.
So I guess for anybody watching this in the future, check out I think we have a slide with our email addresses.
For sure.
And just feel free to reach out and email us and just mention, hey, I saw the presentation or the webinar, whatever you want to call it. I saw the interview and had some additional questions. Please expand upon, my convoluted definition of compartmentalization or anything else, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, so we really want to keep this conversation going. It's a challenging thing to balance responsibilities as a graduate student and a full-time professional. Just doing one of those things is challenging, but putting them together has a whole new range of complexities. So just feel free to connect with us both.
I'm going to say, Molly, I think we have a question. We had a question pop up. How do you get your partner to help with balancing work, life, school? And is that possible?
Oh, good question. Joe, do you want to start?
I'll start. Before even in applying for PhD and EdD programs, it was a long conversation, numerous conversations to say, does this make sense in our life right now? We have, a 3.5-year-old and a 16th-month-old. The 16th-month-old still hasn't slept through the night. So how can you manage going to school one night a week, or in some cases 2 nights a week, depending on how the schedule works out? How is that going to work? How is the funding going to work? And I'm lucky enough that it's, I'm with tuition remission, so I can kind of go to school almost for free monetarily. So it's getting that help. It has to be a mutually agreed upon journey, because you're not taking it alone. Your partner's there with you.
Yeah.
So I would say, how do you get them to help you? Let them know what you're working on. Let them know what your topic is. I haven't gone so far as to share the syllabus with my partner, but she knows I have class. And like I said, I try to compartmentalize it. So it's like, don't worry about what I'm doing. Here's what we talked about in class if you want to talk about it over some wine or coffee, but don't worry about the papers I got to write and the research I got to do. Well, I'll let you in on that when, it makes sense to have that conversation. So I think it is possible. Molly, what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I feel particularly blessed because, I have a wonderful partner, and he is also, we do very similar things. So he's finished with his graduate program already, and he's already in a faculty position. But he has gone through that process, and he understands the ins and outs of it. And so we're able to connect in that way, and I can share, we share writing with each other and, sort of break down our day together. And he really understands, a lot of what I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and has been very supportive of that. So I maybe would turn the question around, not just to get your partner to help you, but also, that's part of choosing a partner is you want, if this is really important to you and something that you want to pursue, you need someone, one of your confidence architects, someone on your board of directors, someone who really supports this.
Absolutely. I think I'll throw this question out there. Almost why, well, it's not really a question.
Yeah.
It's more of, don't do this. Don't pursue an advanced degree, whether it's an EDD, PhD, or a master's degree or a second master's degree. Don't do it because you feel you need to keep up with your peers.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's a good
don't
one.
do it out of the sense of like, oh, I have to do this. I'm being told I have to do this. Because, Molly, you've mentioned it, and I'm just at the start of my journey, and you're almost at the end of it. You have to want to do this, and you have to have the right reasons to do it, because it is a long haul. No matter if it's an executive program that says, oh, it's 18 months, or if it's a traditional program where they say it's an average of 5.5 years or 7 years or 3.5 years, the motivations behind it can't be because you're trying to keep up with somebody else. The motivations behind it, in my opinion, have to be because you're doing this for yourself. You're doing this because you're interested so deeply in this topic that you want to spend the next 3 years focusing on that almost exclusively with any, off brain time that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen to that. And that also extends to, like, as you're choosing what you want to study, or if you want to study, whether it's wonderful to have people around you who support you and who are interested in what you're doing. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to sitting down to write, it's just you by yourself in that chair. And so it has to be something that you really find joy in, as we talked about before. Like, that has to be a source of joy and interest and curiosity and animation for you. Otherwise, it's really just going to be terrible.
Yeah. And that's why I liked what you were sharing about creating that space of whether it's incense or a candle or a nice cup of coffee or a cocktail, like some kind of routine built in, so that once you're in that space, your mind immediately goes to your research or your writing.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, Molly, because I got some interesting advice during my interview for my program. Is your dissertation topic the same topic it was when you first started?
Oh, no, not at all. It's certainly
changes.
evolved. Yeah.
So I was told that right in my interview. They're like, oh, what do you want to study? Oh, I'm interested in this topic. And they kind of smirked and go, yeah, that's going to change.
Right.
So I think people listening who maybe are at that first steps, be aware that I'm really interested in XYZ. That's great. And as you get into the research, you may find that somebody's already researched it, or you're going to find a different aspect of it, or you're going to get down to a micro level of it. Like, okay, they looked at this population at this part of the country. I'm going to look at this population in a different aspect of the country, or from this angle.
Yeah. And I think that's really the hallmark of good research, right? It should be a learning process. If you come in with your own conclusions about, what you're going to find, you're going to be blind to what's actually there. So going in with an open mind, looking for what's in the data or what's in the archives, and building your conclusions out from that, I think is really the best way to go.
That's great. Yeah. All right. I think we're done.
Yeah. Well, thanks to everyone who chimed in, and thanks, Joe, for a really great talk.
Yeah. And thank you too. And thanks everybody who's listening in the future. Please reach out to us. We are, find us either through Google if our emails change, if you're listening to this years and years later and we're no longer at these institutions.
Yeah.
You could probably find us in our dissertations on Google.
Yeah, for sure. Or on Twitter.
Exactly. Yeah.